Okay, so when I was 17 years old, I had this idea that I wanted to become a photographer. Now, photography was very different than filmmaking. I had just basically lost my job because my boss had a heart attack and we couldn't work. So I had this dream of becoming a photographer. So back then you could drink when you were 18 years old. And I was 17 and I was at a bar and I met a guy and we were talking and he was a photographer and we were there trying to like talk to the same girl and she wasn't interested in us. And then what ended up happening is that we ended up having a great conversation. He said, look, I'll hire you because I had a van. And I was like, oh, okay, well, how often do you work? Oh, I work once a month. And I was like, I can't live on once a month. So he recommends the name of a guy for a company called Jenkins Covington. The guy's name was Jimmy Chickalo, and he gives me his number. He says, look, you should call this company up because they hire people who are new to the industry and you probably, have a good skill set to get a job and to work for them. And this was film, this wasn't photography. So I go in, I get an interview, and the next thing I know is I get hired to work for them. And I end up working there an entire year as a production assistant. And I learned things, they taught me things. I knew how to drive a truck, I knew how to pack a truck, I knew how to do propping, I knew how to paint now. I had a skill set in me. And one day what happened was I was making a delivery. And I go to this camera rental house and I ask for the person that's on the delivery. His name is Scott Fleischer. So I said, hey Scott, I'm looking for Scott Fleischer. Scott turns around and I'm like, you live in my building. And he looked at me, you live in my building. So here we are looking at each other and it's like, dude, I live in your building. So we had this immediate bond of like, wow, we live in each other's building. And every time I'd see him, we talk, and he made me an offer. He said, anytime you want a job, I'll give you a job and you can learn cameras, motion picture cameras. So I realized that motion picture cameras lead somewhere because it's like the heart, it's the middle. I had analogies at the time. So my path was very interesting because I went from being a production assistant to deciding that I wanted to learn camera because everything revolved around the camera. That was my observation when I was young. So here's the hub and then here are the spokes. Everything's around the camera. It's like the heart. So I was like, I gotta learn camera. So he said to me, anytime you want a job, let me know. Now, I didn't know anything about it, but I took him for his word. I just okay. So I couldn't afford to work there. It was very low pay. So I went back to the trucking industry. And I ended up working for a year for the nephew of my old boss, took a lot of money, saved a lot of money, and then I literally call him up and say, hey, Scotty, I'm ready to come work for you. And he gave me a job, right? So now I'm working for the premier motion picture camera rental company in the New York area, and they give me this opportunity, and I learned very fast. I understood things fast. Within 3 months, I was basically putting out my own orders. I was working with the assistant cameraman that would come in to check out the equipment. And before you know it, I was killing it. And I worked there for 2 years. And then I got into the union. Once I got into the union back then, it was called NABIT, I ended up getting very lucky and got hired by a production company who had 5 of their own cameras. And they hired me to take care of their cameras and trained me at the same time to become an assistant cameraman. Then I learned how to light. I learned composition. I looked through the lens of a master, one of the top, motion picture commercial directors in the world, Henry Sandbank. The guy is genius. And I learned and I got his eye. I could see everything that he framed and I learned his technique. I learned how he did things and things evolved from there where then I started shooting my own stuff. Then I started directing. And then eventually, I like documentary style. I wasn't really into commercials. I wanted to tell people stories. I wanted people to tell me things about what's going on in their life. But the economics of it wasn't the same. So concurrently, I started a company with my brother called Playback Systems. And we rented video assist equipment. My brother was a technician at General Camera also. So Robbie and I both worked there at the same time. I got him a job. And then he became like the head of the department of adjusting the cameras, because back then they were black and white cameras that were attached to the film camera that allowed everyone to see what was going on, and he would record and you would play back. So that's how I came up with the name, because people would go playback. So I said Playback Systems. That's what I did. And then we had that business till I think it was 2005, something like that, 6. I sold it to someone, and then I started LH Video Services. Now, the reason I started LH Video Services was twofold. I had a familiarity with the equipment, and I noticed that the film industry was shifting. Film was going away, and the digital cinema world came in. And they started going from standard definition video assist imagery to high definition, and nobody had high definition equipment that did what we need to do. So I kept going to Vegas, and I kept going to shows and trying to find that missing ingredient. And I did that for 2 years. Then one morning I wake up, I do a search, high definition video assist, and this thing pops up. It's a whole new system, it's software. I send a text message to the number on there. 2 minutes later, I get a phone call from this guy at a company, and he says, oh, I'm the US rep for this program called Diva at the time. It's now called Q-Take. So basically, I became the guinea pig, and I spent 4 months typing and working with them on making it an interface. And in 2009, they launched Q-Take as a software package that would work with Mac as the premier video assist system on the planet. And now Q-Take is like, it's off the charts. I mean, Q-Take streams anywhere in the world. It's the most popular used video assist software probably in the history. I mean, they just used it on Avatar. They've used it on all the Lord of the Rings. And it's an amazing product because it's very easy to use. It's very robust. It really provides everything that we need and also what the clients need, especially during the pandemic. I mean, being able to stream high definition to anywhere in the world, we could send imagery to clients and to directors, and we're capable of doing anything. So my road into the film industry is it's a pretty cool road, and it's not an unfamiliar road, because a lot of people back in the day, old school day, would go from like being a production assistant, deciding what they want to do, people would mentor you. Instead, what I did is I went into camera and I learned camera at a camera house. So now I was an assistant cameraman. So you go from production assistant to assistant cameraman to learning lighting to becoming a cameraman to becoming a director to owning a video assist rental business to becoming a video assist operator who liked doing visual effects, working on shows like Boardwalk Empire, Unforgettable, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because I could think with things. It became really enjoyable for me because I love helping people. There's something about taking a green screen background and putting things in the background, and all of a sudden people are like, wow, like they see it and they're happy. And that's my thing. I love it when that happens, when people are happy, even if it's strenuous, So that's kind of like my path into the film industry.